Captain Jackson Rivers stood at the edge of the forest, his eyes scanning the distant horizon. The sky was dark, with only the faint glow of distant stars breaking through the thick clouds. His mission was clear: help secure a peace treaty with the Orcs, an alien race that had been causing ripples across the galaxy. But like many others, Jackson was skeptical. The Orcs were known for their mysterious ways and advanced technology, and their royal family, in particular, was surrounded by rumors and fear. As the commander of this mission, Jackson had seen his fair share of strange worlds and species, but nothing had prepared him for the encounter with Zoralia, the Orcs princess. The Orcs were unlike any species he had ever met. They were tall, with an air of elegance and power that made others wary. They had advanced technology far beyond human understanding, and their influence stretched across many planets. But the Orcs princess, Zoralia, had not been what Jackson expected. She wasn't what the reports described. Unlike her people, who often appeared cold and distant, Zoralia exuded a sense of warmth. When Jackson had first met her, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was different, so much more human than the other Orcs he had met. He had heard rumors that she preferred to walk among the humans in disguise, mingling in ways that her royal duties often prohibited. That curiosity had drawn Jackson to her, despite the rules. He had been assigned to assist her during the peace talks, but he had found himself more intrigued by her than he had expected. Zoralia's beauty was undeniable, but it wasn't just her physical appearance. There was something about the way she carried herself, an air of quiet strength and intelligence. It wasn't long before their conversations went beyond formalities. During their first conversation, Zoralia had asked him simple questions, as though she was trying to understand the human race. It was strange, really. She had seen thousands of human beings, yet there was a sense of genuine curiosity in her eyes. And it wasn't just about politics or the treaty. She wanted to know about Jackson's life, his thoughts, his beliefs. They spent hours talking, away from the formal meetings and crowded halls. The more Jackson learned about Zoralia, the more he felt drawn to her. She spoke of her homeland, the Orcs Empire, with a certain sadness in her voice. She wasn't like the others in her royal family, detached, strategic, focused solely on power. Zoralia seemed to long for something more. She had expressed a desire to experience the world of humans, to learn about their way of life outside of the politics that defined her existence. At first, Jackson kept his distance. He couldn't afford to get involved with someone like her, not with the treaty negotiations hanging in the balance. His mission was about peace, not about personal connections. Yet, as they continued to meet, he found himself unable to ignore the pull he felt toward her. Zoralia, too, seemed to sense the unspoken bond that was forming between them. At one point, as they sat by a quiet stream, she looked at Jackson with an unreadable expression. Her soft voice broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder, Captain, if there's more to this life than duty and rules?" she asked, her gaze not leaving. As Jackson hesitated. "I don't know. I guess I never had the chance to think about it much." She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that made Jackson's heart race. "I envy you, Jackson. You have the freedom to choose your path." For the first time since arriving on this alien world, Jackson felt a sense of understanding from her. Zoralia wasn't just a princess wrapped up in political power. She was someone who, like him, had dreams, fears, and a longing for something beyond her duties. As the evening wore on, Jackson realized that he had been drawn into something far deeper than a simple mission. There was something about Zoralia that made him want to protect her, to understand her world, and maybe even share his own with her. But he couldn't ignore the weight of his duty. The peace treaty was important, and the future of both their species depended on it. He had to stay focused, but every time he looked at Zoralia, he felt that nagging pull, an uncertainty about the future that he couldn't explain. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything. The days passed, and the peace talks continued to drag on. Captain Jackson Rivers found himself spending more and more time with Zoralia, the Orcs princess. Their meetings were no longer limited to official discussions. They began to seek moments away from the pressures of politics. In private, Zoralia seemed to open up in a way that Jackson had never expected. One evening, as they walked through the quiet gardens near the Ithrix embassy, Zoralia spoke again of her life, of her struggles with the expectations placed on her as a princess. Jackson noticed the weariness in her eyes, something that didn't belong to a person of such high status. She had always seemed so composed, so perfect in every way, but now he saw the cracks in that perfect image. She was burdened, weighed down, by the title she had inherited, the crown she was expected to wear. "I was born into this life," Zoralia said softly, her voice distant as she gazed up at the stars. "But I never wanted it. My people, they expect me to be their ruler, their strength. They don't understand that sometimes I just want to be someone else, someone who can make her own choices." Jackson listened intently. It was hard to imagine the powerful princess before him being anything but royal, yet there was something deeply human in her words, something that resonated with him. "I think," Jackson began, choosing his words carefully, "everyone has moments when they question the paths they're on. It's hard to live up to the expectations of others. But what do you want, Zoralia? What do you want for yourself?" She turned to him, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "I don't know. I have never been allowed the chance to choose. I am bound by my birthright, my family, my people. They've decided my future for me. I was raised to be a queen, a ruler, but deep inside, I want to be something different. I want to see the world with my own eyes, not through the eyes of an empire." Jackson's heart ached as he listened. He had always thought of the Ithrix as cold and calculating, driven solely by power. But Zoralia was different. She was someone who longed for freedom, for a life beyond what was expected of her. The next day they met again, this time in a more casual setting, away from the formalities of the treaty discussions. They shared a meal, and as they spoke, Jackson felt more at ease with her than he had ever felt with anyone. Zoralia laughed at a joke he made, and for a brief moment, he forgot they were from different worlds, different species. Yet even as their connection deepened, Jackson couldn't ignore the tension that still lingered between their people. The peace talks were not going well. The human delegation was growing impatient, and the Ithrix were equally skeptical of humanity's intentions. It seemed like no matter how much Jackson and Zoralia bonded, the political storm surrounding them threatened to tear everything apart. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, Zoralia's expression grew serious. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice quiet but filled with determination, "about my future, about what comes next for me. I've been raised to rule, to lead my people. But what if I don't want that? What if I don't want to follow the same path as everyone before me?" Jackson looked at her, unsure of where this conversation was going. "I've seen the way you look at me," Zoralia continued, "and I've felt the same way. You're different from anyone I've met. You don't see me as just a princess or a weapon. You see me as a person, with hopes, fears, and dreams. But I'm not sure if that's enough. I don't know if you could ever truly accept me for who I am, not just as Zoralia the princess, but as Zoralia, the alien." Her words struck him hard, and for a moment, Jackson didn't know what to say. The question hung in the air between them. Could he still accept her even if there was more to her than he had imagined? Could he truly love someone so different, someone who carried the weight of an entire empire on her shoulders? "I don't know what the future holds, Zoralia," Jackson replied honestly, "but I do know that what I feel for you is real. It's not about your title or your race. It's about who you are as a person. And that's enough for me." Zoralia looked at him, her eyes searching his face as though looking for some sign of truth in his words. For a moment, the tension in the air seemed to fade, and Jackson could see the uncertainty in her eyes begin to soften. "I don't know if that's enough," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I want to believe it is. I want to believe that someone like you could accept me, even if I am different, even if I am not what you expected." Jackson reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "Zoralia, I don't care what you look like. I care about who you are, and I choose you, no matter what form you take." Her eyes widened in surprise, and for the first time Jackson saw a flicker of hope in her expression. The moment hung between them, full of unspoken words and feelings that neither had dared to voice before. And though the future remained uncertain, Jackson felt something shift within him. He had chosen her, not because of who she was to the universe, but because of who she was to him. Days passed after their quiet conversation, and though Jackson had promised himself he would remain focused on his mission, he couldn't stop thinking about Zeralia. Every time he saw her, it felt as though the world around him faded, leaving just the two of them in a place where nothing else mattered. But beneath the growing affection he felt for her, doubts lingered. The peace talks were still uncertain, and the Ithrics, despite their princess's kindness, were still a powerful and unpredictable force. One evening, Zeralia sent for him. There was an urgency in her message, an emotion Jackson hadn't expected. When he arrived at the Ithrics compound, he was immediately escorted to a secluded room. Zeralia was waiting for him, her face more serious than he had ever seen it. "Jackson," she began, her voice quiet but filled with emotion. "There is something I need to show you. Something I should have told you before, but I wasn't sure if you could accept it." Jackson's heart skipped a beat. The serious tone in her voice, the way she avoided his gaze, it all told him this wasn't just another casual conversation. He nodded, trying to remain calm, though he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Zeralia motioned for him to sit, and then, with a deep breath, she stood. "Close your eyes," she instructed. Jackson hesitated for a moment, but he trusted her. He closed his eyes, wondering what this was about. He had seen the princess in many forms, elegant, poised, and regal. But this felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air that he couldn't ignore. After a moment he heard a soft sound, like a shift in the air. When he opened his eyes, what he saw was not Zeralia as he had known her. She stood before him, but now her form was different. Taller, her skin shimmering in ways that were both beautiful and unsettling. Her features, once human-like, now revealed their true alien nature. Her eyes glowed softly, her skin a strange mix of iridescent colors, and her shape was more angular, more powerful. Jackson stared, unable to look away. This wasn't the Zeralia he had come to know. This was something else, something alien. His heart raced and he felt a mixture of awe and fear. "Zeralia, what is this?" he whispered, his voice shaky. Zeralia lowered her head, unable to meet his gaze. "This is my true form, the one I was born with, the one I have always been. My people, the Ithrics, are not like humans. We were never meant to live among you. I have hidden this from you, but now I can't keep it from you any longer. I needed you to see me, truly see me, before I asked you the most important question of my life." Jackson was speechless. He didn't know what to say. Everything he had known about her, everything he had come to care for, seemed so different now. Her beauty was still there, but it was so foreign, so alien that he didn't know if he could still feel the same way about her. Zeralia's voice was soft but desperate. "I had to show you this, Jackson, because I can't keep pretending to be something I'm not. My people don't see me as human, they never will, but you've accepted me for who I am, and I don't know if that's enough. If you can still accept me for who I truly am." Her words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Jackson could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the same vulnerability he had seen before, when she spoke of her struggles with her role as a princess. But this was different. This was her true self, exposed in front of him, and he wasn't sure if he could handle it. For a long moment, Jackson remained silent, his mind racing. His first instinct was to step back, to put some distance between them. It was a natural reaction. This was nothing like he had ever imagined. But then, he remembered the connection they had shared, the bond that had grown between them. He remembered the kindness she had shown him, the strength she had hidden behind her beauty, and the way she made him feel as though he wasn't alone in a galaxy full of uncertainty. Slowly, Jackson stood. He took a few cautious steps toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he touched her arm. Zorelia flinched at the contact, her eyes wide with fear. "Zorelia," he said softly, "I don't care what form you take. I care about who you are inside, and I choose you, no matter what you look like." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time, Jackson saw the full weight of her emotions. The pain, the fear, the loneliness she had carried for so long, it was all laid bare before him. And in that moment he knew. He knew that no matter what happened, he wouldn't turn away from her. She smiled, the first true smile he had ever seen from her. "You still choose me?" Jackson nodded, his voice steady. "I choose you, Zorelia. Always." And in that moment, everything changed. The peace talks, the war, the galaxy, it all seemed distant. What mattered now was the connection between them. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Jackson would stand by Zorelia no matter what. The days following Zorelia's revelation were filled with tension. Jackson had chosen her, and that was something neither of them could ignore. But as much as they wanted to focus on their connection, the world around them continued to move forward. The peace talks had stalled, and both sides were growing more and more frustrated. Zorelia's people, the Ithrics, had always been powerful, but now with the appearance of a human who seemed to truly care for their princess, they were questioning her loyalty. Jackson could see the strain in Zorelia's eyes, the weight of responsibility, pressing down on her once more. She had been forced to hide who she truly was for so long, and now that her secret was out, she felt exposed in ways she hadn't expected. It wasn't just her physical form that had changed, but everything she thought she knew about her place in the world seemed to be shifting. The future she had been raised to embrace, the crown she was supposed to inherit, all of it seemed distant now. One evening, as the two of them sat together in a quiet garden, Zorelia broke the silence. "Jackson," she began, her voice low, "I don't know what to do. My people are starting to question me. They don't understand why I've been spending time with you, why I've chosen to be close to a human. I've always been taught that humans were beneath us. But now—" She paused, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Now, I don't know. If I can go back to the way things were. If I'm honest with myself, I don't want to." Jackson felt the heaviness of her words. He had seen the way her people viewed him, human, unworthy of their time. But Zorelia wasn't like them. She had seen something in him that made her want to trust him, to believe that peace was possible. "We can't let this tear us apart," Jackson said, his voice steady. "I don't care what they think, Zorelia. We have to focus on what's important. The treaty, your future, our future. There has to be a way for both of us to make this work." She looked at him, her expression torn. "But what if it's not enough? What if the weight of my people's expectations is too much for us to overcome?" Jackson reached for her hand, holding it firmly in his. "We don't know what the future holds, but we do know that we have each other. We can make this work, no matter how hard it gets." For a moment they sat in silence, the world around them feeling distant and uncertain. Zorelia had always known she was meant for greatness, but now, that greatness seemed like a burden. She had never considered a life outside of her royal duties, and now that she was facing the reality of what her life might become, she was unsure of her place in it all. Jackson, on the other hand, was a soldier. He had fought in countless battles, seen the horrors of war, and understood the weight of duty. But what he hadn't understood until now was the true cost of peace. It wasn't just about treaties and diplomacy. It was about understanding each other, finding common ground even when the odds were stacked against them. As the days went by, the pressure on both sides grew. The human delegation demanded results, and the Ithrics were growing restless. Zorelia's position became more precarious by the day. Jackson knew they were running out of time. They had to make a decision, one that would shape the future of their people and their relationship. It was during one of the most intense meetings that Zorelia came to a realization. She had always felt torn between her duties as a princess and her personal desires. She had been raised to be the perfect leader, the one who could guide her people to victory, no matter the cost. But now, in the quiet moments with Jackson, she had begun to question everything she had been taught. The Ithrics were not the only ones who feared change. Zoralia herself was afraid of leaving behind the only life she had ever known, afraid of the unknown future that awaited her. But most of all, she was afraid of losing Jackson. He had shown her a life beyond the confines of her royal duties, a life where she could be herself, not just a figurehead for her people. One night, after a particularly heated meeting with the council, Zoralia found herself standing on a balcony overlooking the distant city lights. Jackson joined her, his presence comforting. They stood together in silence, the weight of their respective worlds pressing down on them. "I'm scared, Jackson," Zoralia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can do this. If I can be the leader my people want, while also being the person I want to be." Jackson took a deep breath and stepped closer to her. "Zoralia, no one can do it all alone. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself. You have me. You have us." For the first time in days, Zoralia let herself believe that it was possible. It wasn't just about her role as a princess or her duty to her people. It was about finding a balance between who she was and who she wanted to be. It was about finding the strength to fight for a future where she didn't have to choose between love and duty. As they stood together, the future seemed uncertain, but Jackson knew one thing for sure. They had come too far to give up now. The stakes were high, but their bond was stronger than ever, and no matter what happened next, they would face it together. The days after their conversation on the balcony grew tense. Zoralia's inner conflict deepened, and Jackson could see the weight of the decision she was facing. The peace talks had reached a critical point, and both sides, humans and Ithrics, were growing impatient. Jackson knew the importance of what they were trying to accomplish, but he also knew that it wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about Zoralia's future, and his future too. The pressure to make a choice had never been so real. The Ithrics Council was pressing Zoralia to declare her loyalty to them fully, while the human delegation was becoming more aggressive in their stance. Time was running out. It seemed that no matter how hard they tried, peace was slipping further out of reach. The weight of the galaxy's expectations was crushing, and Jackson could feel it on both their shoulders. One afternoon, as Zoralia prepared for another meeting with the Ithrics leaders, she turned to Jackson with a look of determination. "I've made my decision, Jackson," she said quietly. "I can't keep living in fear. I can't keep pretending to be something I'm not. I'm going to stand by you, by what we have, no matter the cost." Jackson's heart lifted at her words. He had always known that Zoralia had the strength to make this choice, but hearing her say it out loud brought him a sense of peace. Together they had faced so much already, but now they were about to face something even bigger: the consequences of their love. The Ithrics leaders were not pleased when Zoralia presented her decision. Her choice to align herself with a human, someone they saw as beneath them, was met with anger and disbelief. The room was thick with tension as the Ithrics council members spoke of honor, power, and loyalty. But Zoralia stood firm. She would not back down. She had spent too long hiding, too long pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was done with the lies, done with the expectations that had been forced upon her. "I will not betray my heart," Zoralia declared, her voice steady despite the rising storm around her. "I choose peace not just for my people, but for myself. I choose Jackson." The council murmured among themselves, and Jackson could see the shock in their eyes. They had never expected her to challenge them like this, to step out of the role they had defined for her. But for Zoralia, it was the only way forward. As the tension reached its peak, Jackson stepped forward, standing beside Zoralia. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, a silent show of support. He had promised her that he would stand by her, and now, more than ever, he knew it was the right decision. "What's next?" Jackson asked, his voice calm but filled with resolve. Zoralia turned to him, her expression filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "I don't know. But whatever happens, we face it together. We fight for peace, even if it means we have to fight against those we love." The Ithrix leaders looked at each other, uncertain of how to respond. They had never faced such defiance from their princess. But Zoralia's words had struck a chord, and the council's power was beginning to crumble. They realized that peace was no longer just a matter of diplomacy, it was a matter of the heart. That night after the meeting, Zoralia and Jackson sat in silence, reflecting on everything that had happened. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Zoralia felt a sense of peace. She had made the choice that felt right to her, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew she would face them with Jackson by her side. "I'm scared," Zoralia confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we fail? What if my people never accept us?" Jackson took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll never know unless we try. The future is uncertain, but we've already taken the first step. Together." Zoralia smiled faintly, her heart lifting in his presence. "Together," she repeated, the word carrying more meaning than it ever had before. The next day, as the peace talks resumed, the atmosphere had shifted. Zoralia's decision to stand with Jackson had sent ripples throughout the Ithrix leadership. Her courage had inspired others who had quietly supported the idea of peace. Slowly, whispers of a new future began to spread, one where the Ithrix and humans could coexist, not as enemies, but as allies. The battle for peace was far from over, but Zoralia and Jackson had taken the first step toward a new future. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be many obstacles ahead, but they were ready to face them. Together, they had chosen each other, and in doing so, they had chosen a path that would change the galaxy forever. The days following Zoralia's bold decision were tense, but there was also a sense of relief. She had taken a stand, and the weight of that choice was not lost on her. Every day she felt the eyes of her people upon her, waiting to see what she would do next. Would she be able to bring peace, or would her defiance lead to disaster? The Ithrix leadership was divided. Some supported Zoralia's choice, understanding her desire to forge her own path. Others, however, saw her actions as a betrayal, a threat to the old ways. Jackson could see the change in Zoralia. She was no longer just a princess. She had become a leader, someone who would shape the future of her people, no matter the cost. As the peace talks continued, Jackson and Zoralia found themselves in a constant struggle to convince both sides of the importance of unity. There were moments when the tension between their people seemed too great to overcome. There were nights when Zoralia would sit in silence, wondering if she had made the right choice. But in those quiet moments, Jackson would be there, offering his support and reminding her that she wasn't alone. One evening, as they sat together in the Ithrix palace, Zoralia's expression was distant. Jackson noticed the sadness in her eyes, the weight of the decisions she had made hanging over her. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "I've pushed my people too far. What if they turn on me? What if my decision causes more harm than good?" Jackson reached out, taking her hand in his.
"Zoralia, you've already done more than most would ever dare. You've chosen peace, and that's something that can't be taken away. Your people will come to see that." She shook her head. "I don't know if I can go back. If they reject
me, I'll lose everything. The crown, the throne, my people." Her voice trailed off, the uncertainty in her eyes clear. Jackson squeezed her hand gently. "You won't lose everything, not if we stay true to each other. We've already taken the hardest step. Now we just have to face whatever comes next." Zoralia smiled faintly, but the worry never left her eyes. She had always been raised to lead, to be strong in the face of adversity. But now, for the first time, she was unsure of what the future would hold. The following day, a meeting was called between the human and Ithrix leaders. The council had agreed to discuss the terms of peace again, though there was still much distrust on both sides. Jackson and Zoralia arrived together, their hands brushing lightly as they entered the room. For a brief moment, the weight of the situation felt too heavy to bear, but they stood tall, side by side. The meeting was tense, as expected. The human representatives questioned the Ithrix leadership's commitment to peace, while the Ithrix leaders demanded that humanity recognize their power and influence. The two sides seemed as far apart as ever, and it felt like there was no way to bridge the gap. But Zoralia spoke up, her voice strong and steady. "This is not about power or dominance," she said. "It is about the future of both our people. We have the chance to build something better, something that will last. But we cannot do it if we continue to fight each other. We must find a way to coexist, not just as separate races but as allies." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was silence. The leaders of both sides exchanged uncertain glances, but none spoke. Zoralia could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her. She knew that this was her moment. If she failed now, there would be no turning back. Jackson watched her closely, his heart filled with pride. Zoralia had become the leader he knew she was meant to be. She wasn't just the princess of the Ithrix anymore. She was the voice of reason, the one who would change the course of history. The silence was broken by a voice from the human delegation. "We understand the importance of peace," the representative said, his tone cautious but respectful. "But we also need to know that this is not just a ploy to gain more power. We need to trust that the Ithrix are committed to a lasting alliance." Zoralia nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I understand your concerns, but this isn't about power. This is about the future of our people. If we continue down the path of war, we all lose. If we can set aside our differences and build something new, then we can ensure peace for generations to come." The room fell silent again, and for the first time in days, there was a glimmer of hope. The leaders seemed to be listening, their expressions softening. Jackson could see the change in their eyes. There was still doubt, but there was also the beginning of understanding. After hours of tense negotiation, a new agreement was reached. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was a start. The peace talks had finally yielded results, and both sides had agreed to a new alliance, one that would require cooperation, trust, and most importantly, time. As the meeting concluded, Zoralia and Jackson stood together, their hands still intertwined. The path ahead was still uncertain, but they had made it this far. Together they had faced their fears, made the hard choices, and fought for a future that was worth believing in. "We did it," Zoralia said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Jackson smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "We did it together." And though the road ahead would not be easy, they knew one thing for sure. They had chosen each other, and that was all they needed to face whatever came next. The days after the peace agreement were filled with both relief and uncertainty. Zoralia and Jackson had done the impossible. They had brought two worlds, two races, to a place of understanding. It was not perfect, and it would take time for both sides to fully accept the new reality, but they had made the first step. As the humans and Ithrix began working together to rebuild the fractured relationship between their people, Zoralia found herself in a place she had never been before. She was no longer just the princess of the Ithrix, bound by duty and the expectations of her people. She was now a symbol of change, of what was possible when two very different worlds came together. But the weight of leadership was still heavy, on her shoulders. She had made the right choice, but it didn't come without sacrifices. Jackson stood beside her as he had promised. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing day, and they had learned to navigate the challenges of their relationship, both the personal and the political. In many ways, their love had become a beacon of hope, showing that even the deepest divides could be crossed. But there were still moments of doubt, moments when Zoralia wondered if they were truly ready for the future they had chosen. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Zoralia and Jackson stood together on a balcony overlooking the Ithrix city. The golden light of the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the landscape. For a moment, everything felt calm, peaceful. But Zoralia couldn't shake the feeling that the journey ahead was still uncertain. "I never imagined that my life would turn out like this," Zoralia said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything they had been through. "I always thought I had my future planned. I thought I would follow in the footsteps of those before me, take the throne and rule. But now I don't know what comes next." Jackson turned to her, his expression gentle. He reached out and touched her shoulder, a silent reminder that she was not alone. "I know it's not easy," he said, "but you've already done something incredible. You've chosen a new path and you've given your people something they never thought was possible. You've shown them that change can happen, even when it seems impossible." Zoralia looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "And what about you, Jackson? You've given up so much to stand by my side. I know you've risked everything for me, for this peace." Jackson smiled, a smile that was full of warmth and love. "I haven't given up anything. I've gained everything. I've gained you, Zoralia, and that's all I need." For a moment they stood there in silence, the only sound the soft wind rustling through the trees. There was so much still left to do, so many challenges ahead. But in that moment, Zoralia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of hope. The future wasn't clear, but they had made it this far together, and that was enough. As the days passed, Zoralia and Jackson continued to work side by side, building bridges between the Ithrics and the humans. Slowly, the walls of distrust began to crumble. There were still obstacles to overcome, but they had made real progress. Zoralia's leadership was tested time and time again, but she never wavered. She had come a long way from the uncertain princess she had once been. Now she was a leader in every sense of the word. One afternoon, as the first signs of spring began to show, Zoralia stood before the assembled council of both the Ithrics and the human representatives. The room was filled with quiet murmurs, as both sides prepared for another round of discussions. Zoralia looked out at the faces before her, human and Ithrics alike, and for the first time, she felt a sense of confidence. This was her moment, not just as a princess but as a leader, as someone who had helped shape the future of both worlds. "We've come a long way," she began, her voice steady. "This treaty is just the beginning, but it is a beginning. Together, we can build something new, something stronger than either of us could have done alone. But it will take time, it will take trust, and most importantly, it will take each of us working together to create the future we want." Her words were met with nods of agreement, and for the first time in a long while, Zoralia felt that the path ahead was not one she had to walk alone. The future was still uncertain, but now there was a sense of hope that had been absent for so long. After the meeting, as the council members began to leave, Zoralia turned to Jackson, a tired but content smile on her face. "We did it, Jackson," she said, her voice full of emotion. Jackson smiled back at her, his hand gently resting on her arm. "We did it together." As they stood together, looking out over the city, Zoralia realized that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome. But as long as they were together, she knew they could face anything. Zoralia had chosen her path, and with Jackson by her side, she was ready to walk it, no matter where it would lead. The future was theirs to create. And as they walked into that uncertain future hand in hand, Zoralia knew that their love, their courage, and their willingness to fight for peace would be the foundation for a new beginning, not just for them, but for their people and the galaxy they had come to share.